Joey Burrows. An example of civil disobedience that I'm going to discuss took place in northeast Colorado during May 2003. This happened 2 months after the war in Iraq began. 3 nuns cut through a fence and trespassed en route to a nuclear missile silo. They used hammers to do damage and also ruin the utility of this missile silo. They used their own blood to draw crosses on the objects, and this is all again in protest of the war in Iraq. And it is a very, very, very huge and also very recent example of indirect civil disobedience. When I first read this, I thought of the Griswold-Fortis argument that attempts to, but ultimately fails to, debunk the legitimacy of indirect civil disobedience. I'm going to use the nuns and the climate of America a decade ago to illustrate how Badeau was right to diminish the Griswold-Fortis argument. Then using that, I will explain my position that the nuns were fully within their right to act, that this action was justifiable and served in the purpose of genuinely advancing the anti-war movement. Griswold and Fortis would argue that the destruction of property is not protected by the Constitution. Thus, our current example of this indirect civil disobedience would be criminal. But Badeau points out that the Constitution cannot be called truly just. How do we know? For example, the Constitution did not at first mention slavery or women's suffrage, but the first and only mention of these topics were great milestones for America. The Constitution banned slavery and gave women the vote. But it made the Constitution more just, it didn't make it completely just. Griswold and Fortis also say to not protest or break the law specifically in question or disagreed with is criminal. But what if the protest is not over a law? What if it is over a policy, such as a war? It is not subject to judicial review. The Supreme Court can't overturn the war in Iraq. He limits civil disobedience to war, so policies like national defense, or in this case, offensive imperialism, cannot be appealed justifiably, and this makes this argument incorrect. These two also say that any act that does not interrupt the enabling relationship between the agent of harm and the protester is not able to be justified, and indirect civil disobedience does not do that. But if people have acquiesced to war fever, have accepted the propaganda, then the protester is someone attempting to break away from a relationship of complicity with an imperialist military campaign. The people became accepting of the warmongering, and the nuns were attempting to separate themselves from this complicity demonstrated by non-action, by themselves acting indirectly. Also, Fortis and Griswold argued that one has ample opportunity to create change by playing a role in the political system. But in the politics of fear and big money and distortion, there is indeed a good segment of the population that is truly marginalized. Again, pointing to the fact that women didn't have the right to vote until the 1920s. So if they wanted to commit civil disobedience, which they did in their own right during World War I in order to get the right to vote, that Griswold and Fortis would say that there's something wrong with that. But the roles in the political system for many people are not powerful enough, so these nuns indeed try to do something drastic to fight the power. They did this openly and accepted arrest, and did not do this for any gain, at least nothing extrinsic. Obviously, they probably did it because intrinsically they felt it was a principled choice. And now when we look back at it, at what a disaster and tragic mistake the war in Iraq has become, these nuns look very heroic and their actions seem very justifiable. Thank you for listening to my presentation.